Hey, how's it going? So this is part 2 to the last video I made explaining the user interface. In this video I will be explaining prefab creation and how they are developed and how they work, alongside the interface of the world editor. So within here we have a whole bunch of new various tools. We have object properties on our right, we have hierarchy on our left, and we have create on our bottom left, and then resource browser on our bottom and alongside log console. Now this layout can be moved around, changed, altered by you. Like I said, if you're missing a window, hit window up there and you can see all of them. You'll see about, give or take, 10 different options, 10, 11 in there for windows that you can have open. You can have multiple resource browsers open, so if you want a second one, say you're bouncing between different prefabs while you're working on a map, like you need generators for making stuff, that's pretty much all available to you, almost like a little bit of a palette. So moving on to what all these are, right? So we have object properties. Object properties are going to be the properties of whatever object or entity you are selected on. So say there's an object in the world right here, I click on it and it will drop down the entity class right here, the components that are attached to it, and everything that entails to it. It's pretty simple. Log console, from engine prints to script prints for errors, it's all going to be contained in here, from your warnings, errors, and information. You're going to have your resource browser, which I'm sure you're familiar with this from the last video. It's the same exact style and setup, just compressed a little bit more downward. You have your create, which is where we're going to get our entities from. So there's a lot of stuff in here for entity types. We're not going to be using this or all of these. We're going to be using one specific one for just this prefab creation video, which will be generic entity. So that's that. And then your hierarchy. Your hierarchy is going to be your world's hierarchy. So we have our world here, and then we have our layer. So the layer is what you're building off onto the world of. It's a categorized, like almost like a folder, how you have different like groupings within. That's pretty much how that works. You can set active layers too. This is the only layer, so this is always going to be active. This is just a base subscene. There's nothing in here. And then you have your file, which you'll see save world, new world, load world, and a whole bunch of other stuff. You'll see edit, view, game, tools, window, plugins, entities, help, same as the interface I showed you before. So, explaining these tools too, there's a whole bunch of tools for your cursor. You have a whole bunch of map development tools. You have the weather one, which I'll explain how that works, which is pretty convenient, which I almost find myself using this every time I'm in here. And then measurement, if you really want to get into the technicality of things and measure out a distance, you can do that in the world. If you would like to create a world, you go to File, Load World, or Create or New World. You can make your own. That's a whole different story in another video if you want to hit New World. However, Load World is going to be what you're going to use for now, just for the sake of simplicity for this video. So we're going to hit Load World, and we're going to go to ArmaReforger Worlds, MP test, and then hit mptest.ent and pull that world up. Or you can search in the search bar that will pop up, which I know you can't see the window here, but you search for mptest.ent, and that's the world you're going to bring up for a basic test world. MP standing for multiplayer. So we're in here now, right? So this is a loaded world. There's nothing in here. You can see everything that makes up the world in the default layer, from post-processing to your managers, everything like that make everything function. This is set up for multiplayer, so it's going to have certain aspects to it that allow it to work. You're going to notice here, these are spawns for USSR here and the US. So that's that. Moving on, if you would like to create a subscene in this world, because you cannot edit in this world, if you try to prompt anything or do anything in here, it's going to end up asking you, hey, you can't do this. You want to create a subscene. So The easiest way I find to do this and just get into a subscene is just grab something from your resource browser, drag it, put it in the world. Then it's going to pop up create entity and then give you the warning that I said. Just do that and create yes, and it will load a subscene for you, which will now show you the subscene of that world. And then you have your own layer. In order to use this layer and subscene, you're going to have to hit File and Save World. Now you have many options where you can save it. Do not save it to ArmaReforger. Do not save the core, logs. You have Profile and your add-ons. You can save it to Profile to use across many mods that you make, which I find myself just using one test world I made and added off to that, customized it a bit, and you have your add-on. If you're working just with this world for that add-on, use it there, because it gets hard to manage across different mods if you're not cleaning up. So save it to your mod and rename it to whatever you want, and then you should be good to go from there. It's going to, here, I'm just going to, for the sake of it, I'm just going to save it to my mod and save world. So now you can click play up here. We'll load game, initialize, and wow, you're playing ARMA Reforger in the tools. So it's pretty easy to get in here and play test. So back to it, how prefabs work. So like I was explaining here, these are your entity classes, right? So a lot of these are scripted, and they fall back to scripts or whatever specialized thing they do on the engine side. So we're going to have a generic entity. We're going to drop this down into the world, and now we are left with just a generic entity. This is nothing here, right? So this is a basic blank template for us to work with. And we see the transformation, there's coordinates for it where it's placed on the map. This will always be based on your map and the coordinate the map's at. You have scaling. I wouldn't mess with this too much. Your angles you're not going to be messing with unless you're placing that on certain oriented objects or whatever. And you have your different flags. Moving on, you have your components down here. So you can hit add component. So looking at my entity, I have nothing, right? So what if I wanted to work with a model that I imported into the ArmaReforger tools? Well, you can go down to here on the search bar. You can click mesh object. Now we're gonna, like I said, add component. You can't see the bar that I'm searching in apparently, but I can see it here. Just type in mesh object and you should get this component here, and it will bring it up, and after you click it in, and now you have a mesh object. So this is the component that will handle your 3D model. So say for example I wanted to find a 3D model here. We'll use default, which is stored within common models default under ArmaReforger. So this is a cube, right? Sweet. So now we have a cube. We see that this cube has a material assigned to it. So different objects or models that come from wherever they're created, if they're assigned material points, they're always going to have different materials. This only has one, which is going to be wrapped around in all faces. Specifically, like almost like a folded out, like laid out cube. That's how this will work. So if I like change the model texture over, it's always going to be that. Like this one's specialized in becoming terrain. So whatever terrain this is snapped to, this will be the terrain. Say one of the glass. I can change the glass. You can make your own custom materials. Again, that's going to be in another video, but you can modify whatever's there. For sake of, we're just going to leave it alone and leave it as default. This is clipped in the ground because the origin is going to be centered right in the middle of the model. I'm just going to raise it up so you can actually just see it, the full thing here. So now we have our cube, right? So it's pretty cool, right? It's just a cube. So we're going to notice, wow, I can't do anything with this. It's just there. I can't shoot it. I can't walk through it. I mean, I can walk through it. I can't jump on it. It's just there, right? So it's just a base model. So if the model was set up correctly, and had a purpose to be a collided entity within the game, we're going to use a component for that. So we're going to add a component and type rigid body. We're going to add that. So the rigid body component here will be handling your gravity, your mass, your colliders, whatever you have set. So whatever it was imported with, it will have all that information for it. So now if I play, we're going to notice, wow, I can still walk through it. Why is that? So we don't have an actual collider set up for this. However, we can hit model geometry. We can hit, actually, you know what? We can go to here. We can go to geometries, physics box geometry, name it box 1. And now we can create our own fake collider for it. So how we do this is we go in here, we're going to set the layer preset, and we're going to name it, for the sake of prop fire view. Now, there's a whole bunch of collider types you can play with. They all have different functions, but for the sake of this, I'm just going to do prop fire view for my object. It's just a basic prop, but we're going to play around with. And we're going to go to surface properties. Now, we're going to have a bunch of game. I think I can type game mat and find it. Yep, right here. So this is the material that is going to be used to determine what the hit effect is, or the material on the actual object itself. So, you know, let's just make it a flesh base game mat. So we have a little bounding box here that we can control for our collider size. Now, this is pretty neat because you can create your own collider within the engine. It's pretty cool, but we need to size it correctly, right? So we're going to hit, if you're on Windows 11, you're going to hit Control, Windows, and you're going to see this debug menu. You're going to keep that held, so keep Control and Windows held. You're going to use your arrow keys to go over down to Physics. You're going to hit right, you're going to go down one, you're going to go Show Bodies, and you're going to show the flat mesh. So actually this geometry was set up well. We didn't have to move anything at all in the actual the box orientation, so we already have a collider. So what you're seeing here is the actual collided entity. So we can turn that off, we can get out of here. So we know it has a collider. So now if we hit play game, we go in here, wow, we actually have a collider on it, and look at that, it's flesh. I can make a little smiley face out of it. You can jump on this, do whatever you want with it, so on and so forth. So now we've just created the prop. So if you wanted to collide the prop, this is what you're going to be using as your base template for a collided prop. Some entities will have a component called a RPL component. This is for server to client replication, or whatever replicated thing is going on in the background in order to feed this from system, the client, or so on and so forth, in order to have this processed properly in multiplayer. This is not a dynamic object. We are just making a map prop, so we will not need this. No prop that is a basic prop should have this component unless it has some kind of dynamic influence, like destructible or something like that, where the server needs to actually feed this information to the client multiplayer. But this is just a static prop, so we're going to avoid using this at all costs because it does run up the server's budget and it will influence server stability. So now we just have an object and we want to make it interesting, right? So we have another component where we can add something to it. This is the basic way of doing it, and There's probably a better component to use for this, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to use this component, which is slot manager component. We're going to go down the slots, and we're going to see we're going to have a whole bunch of entity slots here, right? From registering, which registers all scripts and information that are fed. You're going to see wheel slot info for vehicle wheels. If you have custom wheels that are separate from the actual model, you have entity slot info. So we're going to create entity slot info in that slot category here. It's going to pop up after you click it here, and you're going to pop up a drop down box here that says enter object name. So we're going to name it S1 for slot 1 and press OK. Now we have a slot. So what's cool about this is we can put another prefab in here, and just, fair warning, do not put the same prefab inside of the slot. You will crash the entire workbench. You're trying to put itself on itself, and it will break it. We can go to ARMA Reforger, we can go to prefabs, and say we wanted a traffic cone. So we have a traffic cone now. We can hit the Y here. Whenever you're moving it, so if you're off that offset, you're going to move the, sorry, let me get back in the window. You're going to move this, right? So you want to make sure you're clicked on this first in this window, and now you can move the slot. So now we have a cone on top of our box. Pretty sweet. You can merge the physics with it. You can add auto transformation to it. You can disable your physics interaction, inherit the parent skeleton, which is this parent, and then your replication stuff and whatnot, your slot mappers. But this is just me attaching a object to another object. It's pretty simple and straightforward. So if we go in game now, and we look at this, we have a cube with a cone on it, like I said. It can be shot off because it's got its own collider, it's already set up. It's another complete prefab. So that prefab we used here, we can drop this down to the world, which I used a basic prefab here. You can see that this was destructible. See how it flew off like that? So this had a destructible component to it, and then it had an RPL component. So this was replicated for multiplayer in order to have that happen in a live game or whatever. In the workbench, you're not going to need replication. You are practically playing on the server's end, or technically as a server, as a character. So you can see everything the server pretty much sees on this side. If you were working with Peer Tool, that's when it would become replicated, or if you're working with a dedicated server, that is when it would become replicated. So this is a replicated object, something dynamic. Alright, so moving on, if we wanted to add something else to the world, say we wanted a particle effect to play, there is a bunch of options we could do, but I'm going to make the most straightforward one. We're going to add a particle editor, or entity, sorry. So we're going to place that down, and this is a particle effect entity class. This is like generic entity, except, whoa, we get an effect now, and we get a bunch of controls on it. So the effect path will bring you to a PTC file, which we can type a fire, which will be a looping effect. So we do campfire medium, and look at that. We don't even need anything in here, it's just a particle effect. And it can play the PTC within there. And so, what I was saying earlier with this weather manager, you can go here, you can click on it, you'll see a drop down box, or it might pop up in your entire screen. Make sure you minimize that because it gets in your way. You'll see time. Change your time scale to night. I usually drag it all the way to 1, which is all the way night. Now you'll see it is nighttime. So now we have this playing at night. We can see all the effects from the particle, the light that's emitted, and we can see it a lot more clear. Moving on, we can bring this back to daytime, which is actually pretty neat. If you look at it, you can see the sun cycle and everything. I'll leave that as day. And we're going to actually take a look now at a developed prefab. Now, most people are going to be working with vehicle mods. So, if you're looking to make a vehicle or whatever, or maybe even, you know, a, clothing piece or whatever, there is already some created prefabs you can use, which we can just look at the LAV25 like I showed for example before. This, and we can look at, we're going to look at the base class to make it easier. So we have our LAV25. So there's going to be the couple components we recognize on here. So we're going to see the mesh object, and we're going to see the rigid body. This has a vehicle class on it. So this entity class is vehicle. This is specifically used for the vehicles themselves and how the engine handles them. Like I said, this is all falled back to a script and stuff that is created for them in order for them to work properly in Fusion. We have our slot manager, which we also recognize, and how I said there was multiple types of entity slots. You have your entity slot info, your registering component slot, wheel slot. There's a couple other ones in here. I won't go that far down, but each one has a different function for it and what it can do. You can see this one has a bunch of register functions to it. This one also does too, but this is specifically designed for wheels. So I could literally just take this wheel, and if I really wanted to, gone. It's off. We no longer have a wheel on there. So in order to understand what's going on in this prefab for a vehicle, we need to look at the different components. So we have different handling ones like the signal managers. We have our event handling. We have our sound components, which are linked up to play sounds at different point infos. We have those ACP files I was talking about, which are different audio files that are linked up here. So within this component, it's playing the ACP from these sound points. These are all hooked up to specific signals that are going to be played. So like engine damage state, this should trigger the engine damage state within the vehicle sounds, which might be the vehicle fires, if I'm not mistaken, or the vehicle engine for the damage threshold state, which it will switch to produce a different sound. We have the AI knowledge component, which is, I'm guessing, related back to the AI stuff. I don't play around too much with the AI stuff. Still learning in that area, which it's a lot of scripted work. We have base light manager component. This is our flashies, which if I turn this off, go here, nighttime, we can see that I could probably change the light states on these to be on, so that I can specifically turn the light on. You can see how all these work in the light manager component. These are going to be linked up to actions. You can guess where actions are. They're going to be in the actions manager component. Go down past the context, and we can see light switch. Where is it? We see our light hazards. See the light switch. We see the position of it, and we can see that this is linked up to the inside of here, which I turned it day. But there's an environment, a environment probe inside of there that makes it a little bit harder to see the whole volume for the lighting in there. But the light switch is somewhere seated here. The way this component works is you have your action context. It'll be the location at which your action will be. So if I place that, say, on the front of the tank, and then I added the additional action to it, these are scripted actions. I could toggle the engine, which I'm assuming is to turn on. You could use the context to place it here, and then you can turn on the engine from the front of the LAV. So you can move it around to whatever. you play around with that. These are your action setups here. Your vehicle animations, which are your animation graphs, which I was talking about in the last video. You have your different animation stuff. I'm not going to get too depth with this. Your gamepad managers for controller effects and everything. I think they've just left this in here. It has no current effect. This would be for like vibrations in the controllers and stuff. You have your networking stuff, your replication for multiplayer, your hierarchy. You're going to have your collider histories, controllers. You're going to have your AI vehicle usage component, your base compartment manager component. This component will contain all the seats that are related to the occupants of the vehicle. So you have your UI info, your action context, what they're linked to, seat position, which should be located right down here near the bottom. Yep, passenger position info. The pivot ID is driver idle. This was set up as a memory point within, I'm assuming, Blender, and it will be the actual driver's seat of the vehicle. Okay, we get our base lock component. We can lock the vehicle out completely, or we can just leave that. Editable component. So any editable component that is placed down, there's different ones. It's specified for vehicles or objects, whatever. This one is specifically for the vehicle. You're going to see your UI info. You're going to have your authored labels, your auto labels. These are traits that will show up in the GM menu, which will be the category that is located right here. If I pull this up, you can see that we have vehicle. Entity type, vehicle. So there are a whole bunch of categorization filters that you can use in order to have it show up. There is specifically a modded one too that not a lot of people use, but you can go here and click modded. You have your budget costs, which I'm sure if you played Conflict, you would know that stuff costs actual supplies. You have your rank, and so on and so forth. Your fuel consumption, the rate at which it consumes fuel, and the idle fuel consumption. And yes, you do consume fuel in this game when you idle. Fuel manager, you can see your fuel cap position, which is going to be located right up here. And receive fuel, vehicle medium, you can see the fuel type. Electricity would be neat if somebody actually made an electric car. You can see the max fuel for it. Position info, like I was saying. You have your impact effect, which are going to be your impacts for water or land. So if I drop this vehicle, say on land, picked it up, bam, makes a big impact effect. Your motor exhaust component, I'm sure you know what this is. If a vehicle has an exhaust on it, you're going to end up seeing the exhaust come out of it, and this is where it's going to be located. So by default, it's going to be the smoke, right? You can't see it on my screen, but it's going to be a basic smoke. Now, I can get funky. I can go in here, change this to that vehicle fire small, go in here, turn the engine on. Now we got fire. Right, so you can modify that. This component is not on here. I assume this is a newer component. I haven't played around with this one. It's relating to power. We have our resource component for our resource containers for supplies. We have our universal inventory storage component. This is for the entire inventory system of the vehicle when a player is putting stuff in here. AR inventory trunk. So that's the trunk space. Opens up your inventory virtual entity ET. And then this should have a bunch of UI widget interface stuff that pops up on your screen. So when you go up to a vehicle and you want to open your trunk, it's all in here. right? We can actually check if there is some stuff in here. So like multi-slot configuration, slot template. It's already preloaded with field dressing and a whole bunch of other stuff in here. Vehicle buoyancy component. This is for the total buoyancy of the vehicle. This is an amphibious vehicle, so it will have a buoyancy component. We're going to have our camera data. This is for the pivot point on the camera, where it sits. Like say you're driving, you're going to be sitting up on a camera angle. It's going to have a third-person control. Vehicle dust per wheel. How many wheels do we have? Right? So automatically the game should know to automatically assign it. We have our faction affiliation, US, just add an SR, and now we have Russian. We have our vehicle spawn protection. Cannot enter vehicle. This stops the guys in conflict from stealing your vehicle as soon as you spawned it in. This was an issue previously. You have our wheel damage manager component, which is going to be our different damage states, different collision points. Like I said, with colliders, vehicles have special colliders that are different hit points at which the armor is, or the actual feel points, whatever. The hull has a hitbox called SCR Flammable Hit Zone. Now, not a lot of people refer back to this, but this flammable hit zone is what is going to set your vehicle on fire. The more incendiary damage that is met to this, it will increase, and then you will eventually be set on fire. This is a completely separate hit zone from your health, so you have your vehicle armor and your vehicle actual like smoke health. So say I shot this as many times as I wanted to, right? With a normal M16 and just normal ammunition, it's not going to do anything, right? So, but if I hit with our RPG, that RPG has an incendiary effect to it. So what's going to happen then is it will do the base damage from the RPG, but then it's followed up by an incendiary effect. So it will take a chunk out of the health, but also it will take a huge chunk out of that incendiary damage because I have hit it with an RPG that inflicts that. So that's why sometimes it seems too that your vehicle will catch on fire before the armor actually decays, is because of that incendiary damage effect. You have your destruction particles, different damage state particles, your engine fire state signals, your different colliders, so you can see the engine colliders here, and a whole bunch of other stuff going on in here for the certain collider types. You got your damage state thresholds, vehicle light portal. I'm assuming this is set up for the actual positions for the entryways. Yeah. Then we have vehicle wheeled simulation. This is for the simulation of the vehicle itself. You're gonna see a whole bunch of stuff in here. Brass, flatten. So pretty much, not to bore you, this is pretty much simple of how prefabs work, right? So you have a component that works with a class. So you have a class here, and you have components that you can build off the class from, and create it into an actual physical prefab. Now, we have a whole bunch of stuff that does a whole bunch of things and communicates with one another, but these all loop back to scripts. So you can always see that if you right-click something, you can see jump to script definition. And you can look where that's located and what it's communicating with back in the actual game engine. But that's pretty much how vehicles work, or any prefab works really, is you're going to have your universal components that are set up differently. So like I said, the inventory component, so let's go back to inventory. You have your universal inventory storage component right here, and you're going to see a lot of this on anything that contains an inventory. You're also going to see, like I said, the mesh object and rigid body on anything that has a 3D model and a collider. You're going to see Signal Manager if anything has a sound effect that needs to be played or something that needs to be bounced back that requires a signal. You're going to see this component. RPL, anything that is replicated. Hierarchy, you're going to see anything that belongs to the hierarchy. Slot Manager, anything that requires slots to function. So say like a turret, wheels, whatever. Some 3D models also have wheels built in that the game engine instantly registers and says, hey, you have wheels. And then your actions, you're going to have actions too. A lot of items are going to have this too, like objects like guns or whatever. You drop a gun on the ground and it says pick up. That's what this is feeding into. So a lot of it's simple. They've made it very easy to understand with the names. You're going to have to go through and you're going to have to look and understand everything that's going on. It's not by any means easy to understand all of this at first, but once you get a hang of it, you'll start recognizing what everything does really fast. I just used a vehicle as an example for this, but if you wanted to pull up a helmet, say we just do helmet, right? You see that it's just a basic inventory item component, a mesh object component, a parametric material component. This is a special material handling component. We got our rigid body, which we already know this. Our sound data, which is going to be related to the pickup sound. See, sound event name, sound project. When you pick it up, it makes like a little click noise or whatever, like you grabbed it. Our base loadout cloth component. You're going to notice this on clothes. You're going to have a worn model, and you're going to have an item model. Item models on the ground, worn models on the player. Your area type is going to be loadout head cover area. That area type is related to what slot this is going to be a part of when attached to a player. So in my inventory, if I go in here, look, helmet, this will be your head cover area. Face cover area if you're using Zelix mod as a dependency, which you'll see that in a couple servers you're playing on or whatever. You'll see a face slot component. He has created some specialized stuff in there. You're going to see your backpack slots, your vest, whatever, and you can see it all feed back into here and all these areas. You have material overrides. Say you're working with a reskin and you want to do something special to this model. You can just click down, more material overrides. Bam, look at that. So we have, I'll give you something from the common area. Just like a glass effect. So look, if you're overriding a texture, look at that. I got a glass helmet and a fishbowl in my head. So it's pretty simple in there. Like I said, action, the pickups, RPL component, you have a replication, and you have your hierarchy. And this is a game entity. So to recap, like I said, you have your entity or your entity classes. Entity class, and then you have your components. So prefab creation is pretty simple. There's already a lot that Bohemia Interactive has created for you to work with. You can script and make your own. That is the whole point of scripting and developing, is you can create the game you want to make, specified to your own playstyle, or to create something very unique for other players to use. And yeah, it's pretty simple. There's not a whole lot to it besides just understanding what the components do that are already there existent for you. But yeah, that will be it for this video. That's pretty much simplified prefab creation. It's currently 3:28 in the morning, and I require a bit of sleep, so I'll make another video sometime soon. Take it easy.